Hi and welcome to Soul Stretch. My name is Esme, and this time I would like to talk about space holding. And it's a topic that comes very close to my own experience as a facilitator, yoga teacher, and space holder. And I'm sure you will recognize this that it is very natural for us to hold space for others and to be available continuously for others to lean in that safe container that we hold. And in order to do that, it asks something from us which brings us in a very vulnerable place, I found out, because I can never really hold a safe container, a space where people can really drop into themselves when I am not bringing all of myself in, which means that in a moment that I hold back what is really alive in me and try to pretend that I'm here for you from a place of expectation, or the projection that the way I should be as a coach is like not showing, like leaving myself outside the door. That's what they usually also like teach us um, when we are in coach school or yoga school. So I found out that it is actually impossible to do that. That also the person that I will meet um, will never really have the opportunity if I am not putting myself out there and going beyond my own management and mm, masks and roles. And it's actually very hard when I tried to explore that a bit more while I was inviting by different people to just start with tuning in, like being and bringing this presence in our hearts and inviting all of ourselves in, and from there to check what's alive in our bodies, what's alive in our mind and in our heart. And from there, only from there, from this place of connectivity, I'm actually able to fully mindful open the space to connect to others instead of rushing over what very subtly is actually giving all the magic and all the information that needed to be met in this moment. So the reason why it's hard is because that management is there for a reason, and we all have it. So the management that we usually developed around our younger years, or when maybe very like painful situation happened, that kind of developed all these kind of attitudes where we actually hold ourselves back, our energy back, in order to not be rejected and to find belonging, actually. And when we do that, also in this moment, when we are very careful in the way we approach each other, seeing what the other expect or what the other person can have or not, of course it's good to check in if we are able to have space for each other. But when we're then finally there and we open a space, when presence is not there, um, there's not a real meeting there, and that's what we are most longing for. And whether we know it or not, like there is this part in us that is just craving to be really seen, to be met, and to be felt from where we are. So when I invite someone else to do that, I have a direct invitation to do the same. Because how many times have you been in that space that you opened your heart and you finally start expressing yourself freely, but at the moment you stopped, those thoughts arise about like, oh my gosh, did I really do that? Or what would she actually think of me? And whatever she would say, or he, the person that held space for you, It doesn't really matter for that part because she probably doesn't believe when she says, "Oh, thank you so much that that you share this with me. Like I feel you, or it did this and this to me when in your like feeling you in your presence." Um, it's a very fearful part that doesn't show up just naturally. So, as space holders, a very good practice for us is to equally meet where we would like to meet the other person or where we would like to invite the other person. And a way to do that is exactly what I said, to first set the space and to be very clear what that space is about and to bring presence in. So it all starts with awareness and presence inside of ourselves. So first bring the energy that is so focused on wanting to hold space or help the other person back to ourselves, to actually feel where I am at and what is alive in me, and from there to check in with each other and to open the space. And when we do that and then we open the space to share, it is very helpful if we share as well afterwards, or we can use ourselves as an instrument to start with, to for the other person to feel safe. And I noticed in myself that it did the same for me, because I'm also very excited to really meet and to really being open, and presence is actually amazingly vulnerable, to have no agenda and to let intuition guide us, to let our heart intelligence guide us and bring in the moment what wanted to be met when we encountered and came together. And when presence sinks in, only from that moment that really happened, you will know. And you will not have to think about how it should be for the other person or what I want to gain from this moment. That it will all be on the background. Um, from presence, um, we start building courage, because when we dare to meet each other in this way, then real healing can happen instantly. Then we can really help each other to drop in. And the only thing is holding space in that way. Holding space is not fixing, it is not wanting to make things different. It is not about me, it's not about the other person, but it's about the meeting in presence that decide for us what wanted to reveal itself through us. And that will be a whole new way of holding space for one another, where actually really the magic happens. And there is this amazing a quote that exactly expresses about this way of showing up with all of us. And no matter what other people think, it's a practice that invites us into real conversations and real meetings. And this is really an act, not of weakness, because that's what we are mostly afraid of, to show ourselves and maybe become soft, because we actually are, our harness is melting, our hardness is melting, because actually we feel we don't have to be any different than we are. And it asks both of us to show up in the arena, not only to invite your student or your participant in your workshop or in your retreat or your client in a session to do that, but for that person to be able to do that, they need us. We need to example that, so that we have that new imprint from what that it felt like to really be out there. And I'm just gonna read you this part from Dare to Lead. So it's the quote of Theodore Roosevelt. It's about daring greatly. It's a very famous one. So it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives violently, who errs, who comes short again and again, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So being out there in the arena is, I think, the best thing, like the most courageous thing that we could offer one another as human beings, whether we are facilitate or not. It will be the same for our partners, for our friends, and also for our families. It's a way of practicing holding space in another way, and that starts by meeting ourselves fully first, to learn to hold space for ourselves, so that we start learning like what is alive from there, and that in meetings so easily withdraws part of ourselves. And that's such a pity, because the most beautiful thing is to meet each other right where we are, just as we are, so that we don't have to pretend, and that we could really, really relax, and like moving beyond fear of needing to be any different, and just this relaxation that comes to presence that we can offer each other will change such a big deal in our relationships. So a way of exploring that in yourself is exactly what I just shared. It's about taking the time to regularly just tune in with yourself, to become present, and from there to continue with the checking. And I always like check my body, like how does my body feel? How is the body? How is my mind? Like what's going on in the mind? And in my heart, to really question, like inquire about myself, like who am I, and am I still here? Do I still connect to my own rhythm, or am I following someone else's? Like, how do I feel in this moment? What's alive for me right now? Not from an experience that I had an hour before, a week before. We can share so many stories, but can we leave the stories for ourselves, and to allow a new story to arise from the meeting that happens right now in this present moment? And from there, we will easily also be more connecting to our needs and our longings, and that will help us to take care of our well-being and our health before it turns, before we cross our boundaries way too far. And you can also practice even a step further, reaching out to someone else to ask if they would practice with you this way of holding space, where you tune in and do the check-in all together. And when you feel present and ready, then you give the other person the opportunity to share for a few minutes, and you set the timer, and you just hold space without doing anything, not reacting, and then turn it back to you where you are sharing, or the other way around. And then just see how that feels. I'm really curious how this practice is for you, or if you're already familiar with that. And it would be even more amazing if you would be willing to share it underneath this video, and to inspire each other and give each other permission to meet each other this way. And if you feel this video was valuable to you, please share it with your friends and your relatives. And I hope to see you see you next week in Soul Stretch on Wednesday. Thank you for watching.